Greg Hughes, Utah Speaker of the House of Representatives and an ardent supporter of Donald Trump. Thank you so much for being on Three Questions
Thanks
today.
for having me, Bob.
A lot of high-profile Utah politicians jumped off the Trump bandwagon prior to the election. Right. Now that he has been elected president, do you feel vindicated?
You know what? It was a difficult campaign cycle, and there were a lot of twists and turns. You know, I throughout it all, I just wanted to do what was right. I had to compare the goods, the pros and cons with both candidates, and there was a lot to consider. I never did veer from my support of Donald Trump, even when I was disappointed or wanted more out of that whole race or its tone. And so, yeah, I'm more happy, not for myself, but for our country and for my kids, because I thought that the vision that Donald Trump was offering was one that I believe in, and the one that Hillary Clinton and the history of Secretary Clinton, Senator Clinton, First Lady Clinton, I think I've seen that show, and I think I know what that means, and so I thought it was really important for our country to get behind Donald Trump, and I felt like it was the media. You guys were telling me it was a long shot, that it was never going to happen, so that made me even more stressed. So I'm relieved. I think probably the most prevailing feeling I have is relief.
How do you account for the fact that the media and the pundits and the data collection folks got this election so wrong going in?
So I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I came out here to go to college. My wife is from Utah. That made me a Utahn. I love Utah. But I have family that are back in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and some people that interact in their businesses and with people of different socioeconomic statuses, your electricians, union members, executives, police officers, you name it. And there was a sentiment in Southwest Pennsylvania, and that was that they didn't trust or feel that Washington, D.C. represented them. They felt their health care was more expensive than it had ever been, less accessible. People's jobs in Pennsylvania were being outsourced overseas. And as we saw the narrative of the campaign from Hillary Clinton, I think she was missing middle America, or our average Joe, average Jane. And they came from the Democrat side, unaffiliated or Republican, but Donald Trump's base was not from a political party, in my opinion. It was from this middle America, or these average ordinary citizens who just didn't feel represented. And I felt that that was the base that Donald Trump enjoyed. And I think that pollsters were looking at this in a more traditional way. What does a Republican base say? What does a Democrat base say? And so I think that the polls were off, because I think that average person, or maybe even that independent voter, wasn't as sampled or emphasized as much as I think was happening around us.
During the course of the campaign, Mr. Trump said quite a few things that got certain groups very concerned about their future here in America. What can you say to Utahns who are concerned about being deported, or concerned about having their marriages nullified, or concerned about having some kind of civil right taken away from them? What can you say to them?
So one of the problems that Donald Trump had as a non-traditional candidate is that he didn't say, there's techniques that elected officials use. Say nothing to offend no one. Focus group your message. Test what you're saying so that you make sure you don't say the wrong thing or it's taken the wrong way. Donald Trump didn't follow any of those rules. He would say what was on his mind. And I think throughout that whole campaign cycle, Bob, much of what he said, the logical extreme of his comments or the wrong interpretation was taken. And so in the area of illegal immigration, it's been thought that Donald Trump just opposes immigration. I know that he's talking about illegal immigration. And I have even heard him talk about there needs to be a more sensible and practical way to see immigration occur, where it doesn't leave people wanting to come to America illegally, because we have a system in front of us that actually works. I don't think that message got through. And I'll tell you, Donald Trump, I guess the term is inartfully. He would inartfully describe some of his positions, one being in Syria. I think that he got better at the end of the campaign to say that's an area in particular chaos. You have a country like Syria where people emptied out and you don't know who people are. The vetting and for security purposes of those individuals, we need to pay extra attention to. The scrutiny needs to be as high as we possibly can lend to such an area that's so unstable. And it could bring risks to our country. That's not how he said it. He broad-brushed, you know, the Muslim faith or things like that, and I think even he regrets maybe some of the more inartful ways that he said those things. But he got better at that. But again, him not being a politician or using the tools of the trade of politics, as many of us have, I think there was a refreshing side of that to his campaign, that rough edges and all, people thought, this is a guy that will really tell us how he feels, and there's an authenticity to that. So I think, again, I think he made a lot of his own problems in the way that he would describe things, but I think that why he's president today, or president-elect, is that I think he's not your traditional candidate, and I think people feel like our political traditions have failed us, and so they're willing to give him a shot.
It's being reported that you may be considered for a cabinet post, perhaps Secretary of Transportation. What can you tell us about that? Have you heard from?
No, but I've read what you've read. I know that there's stories out there that say that could be a possibility. I've not been in touch. The last communication I've had is with Donald Trump Jr. on Monday night, right before the election. I texted him. He'd been on a national program and wished him luck. As busy as he is, he texted back, and we kind of shared a little bit of his nervous, optimistic, but very, very nervous. And so I've not talked to Don Jr. or anyone from the Trump campaign or transition team since then. And look, I just think I love being Speaker of the House. We have a term coming in front. I just won my re-election. I love my colleagues, and so I have a lot of work to do here. And that's where my focus is. So I don't put a whole lot of weight in some of these things that we're hearing. It's flattering to be considered, but I got a big job in front of me here.
If they offered you the job, would you take it?
Well, look, I got ADD. I don't know if I could sit in an office all day. I don't know what is out there or what they would offer that would be. I love traveling the state. I love meeting with my colleagues. What I do, I don't sit still very long, and I don't know if anything like that even exists in an administration. So I would have to know what they were talking about. But again, it's flattering to be considered in terms of a prospective spot, but I do love being Speaker of the House here in Utah.
On election night, the Democrats here in Utah were pretty much all in one place, but the Republicans were spread out in at least 3 different places.
Yeah.
And then you add to that the Evan McMullin factor, where he came along, entered the race late, and performed very well in the closing days of the election and on election night. It is pretty clear that the Republican Party in Utah is fractured.
Yeah.
What can be done, and can it be done, to unify the party at this point?
So looking backwards, I'll tell you, you had our governor who did not support the top of the ticket, the Republican nominee. You had Senator Lee in his reelection not supporting the Republican nominee. And I think that can be awkward. And I think that seeing that even Congresswoman Mia Love, they decided to go away from the Republican state celebration that we typically all kind of come together. If you've not been supportive of that ticket and he wins or even loses, I'm sure the chemistry wouldn't have been as strong, and so you saw that. But Bob, I got to tell you, success and victory, it's a great potion, and it's a great elixir to bring people together. And I think that was not systemic or a